I wasn't surprised when Victoria told me she wanted a divorce. The signs had been there for months, her increasing disdain for our home, her girls' weekends, that stretched into weeks. The way she scrolled through luxury real estate listings while sighing loudly enough to ensure I noticed. What did surprise me was her timing. 20 years is long enough to be stuck in mediocrity, she announced over breakfast, sliding divorce papers across our kitchen table like she was passing the salt. I need to rediscover myself. I looked up from my coffee, served in the same chipped mug I'd used since we were newlyweds. Victoria had tried to throw it out at least a dozen times. Rediscover yourself, I repeated. She nodded, tapping manicured nails against the table. I've spent 2 decades waiting for our life to become exceptional. I'm done waiting. I could have told her then about the letter that had arrived 3 days earlier, about Uncle Morris and his fortune, about the strange stipulation in his will, but something in her expression, that familiar blend of condescension and impatience, stopped me. Instead, I asked, and this has nothing to do with Richard Kennedy's divorce being finalized last month. A flash of something, guilt, perhaps, crossed her face before she composed herself. Richard Kennedy, CEO of a tech company I'd helped establish through my accounting firm, had pursued Victoria relentlessly at the Christmas party. She'd been flattered by the attention from a man whose home had been featured in Architectural Digest. This isn't about anyone else, she said, but her eyes slid away from mine. This is about me finally prioritizing my happiness. I nodded slowly, remembering Uncle Morris' words during his last visit. The problem with people who chase status, nephew, is they never recognize true value until it's too late. And what would make you happy, Victoria? She straightened in her chair, as if glad I'd finally asked the right question. I want the life I deserve. I want the Prescott house on Lakeview Drive. I want to travel without checking price tags. I want to stop pretending that this, she gestured around our kitchen with its dated cabinets and reliable but unfashionable appliances, is enough. The Prescott house, of course. The sprawling colonial that had just hit the market for $2.3 million, with its marble countertops and infinity pool overlooking the lake. I see, I said, and took another sip of coffee. And how do you propose we divide our assets? She slid another document across the table. I've outlined everything. I get the investment portfolio, the vacation cabin, and half of your business shares. You keep the other half of the shares, your retirement account, and half the proceeds from the sale of this house. I glanced at the paper. After 20 years of marriage, she'd reduced our life together to a list of properties and accounts, and she'd strategically selected the assets that could be liquidated quickly. You don't want the house? I asked, though I knew the answer. She wrinkled her nose. This neighborhood hasn't appreciated in value for 5 years. Besides, I've already put in an offer on a condo downtown, something temporary until I find something worthy. I thought of Uncle Morris again, his weathered face as he sat in this very kitchen 6 months ago, telling stories about his adventures while Victoria excused herself to take a call she claimed was urgent. How he'd noticed her absence. Noticed the way she'd rolled her eyes when he mentioned his modest cabin in Wyoming. What about the terms of the settlement? I asked. Victoria leaned forward, her expression softening into the persuasive look she'd perfected over the years. I don't want this to be messy, Thomas. My lawyer says we could be done in 8 weeks if you don't contest anything. You can keep living here until the house sells. I'm being more than fair. 8 weeks. The final clause of Uncle Morris will echoed in my mind. My entire estate shall pass to my nephew, Thomas James Caldwell, provided he is residing in the house he currently owns and occupies at 47 Maple Street at the time this will is executed, and for a period of not less than 3 weeks after probate is complete. The executor had been clear in his letter. Probate would be complete in approximately 11 weeks. I needed to be living in this house as its legal owner for 3 weeks after that. I'll need to think about it, I said finally. Victoria's smile faltered. There's nothing to think about. I've made my decision, and I need to make mine. I stood up, taking my mug to the sink. I'll have an answer for you tomorrow. She watched me suspiciously. She'd expected either anger or pleading, not this calm consideration. In 20 years of marriage, I'd rarely denied her anything she truly wanted. Fine, she said, gathering her papers. But don't think stalling will change anything. I've already booked my move-out date with the luxury moving company, the one with the uniformed staff and climate-controlled trucks. Of course she had. Victoria had always been meticulous about appearances. After she left for her pilot's class, with an instructor who had once trained celebrities in Los Angeles, as she reminded me weekly, I took Uncle Morris' letter from my office safe, and read it carefully. Morris Caldwell had lived simply despite his wealth, investing wisely in tech stocks long before they were fashionable. He had never married, claiming he'd never found a woman who valued the right things. He'd been disappointed, when I married Victoria. Beauty fades, nephew, he'd warned, but entitlement only grows stronger. According to his executor, Morris had left his entire estate, valued at approximately $37 million after taxes, to me, with that single, non-negotiable condition about the house. If I failed to meet it, the money would go to establish wilderness conservation trusts. I had to stay in this house, as its owner, for just over 14 weeks. The question was how to do that without tipping my hand to Victoria. I've decided not to contest the divorce, I told her the next morning. Victoria looked up from her phone, surprised but pleased. That's sensible of you, but I have two conditions. Her expression immediately hardened. I've been more than generous, Thomas. First, we use a mediator instead of fighting through lawyers. It'll be faster and cheaper for both of us. She considered this, then nodded reluctantly. Victoria disliked any reference to saving money, but she was eager to move forward. And second, I continued, we structure the settlement to allow me to stay in the house for 4 months before putting it on the market. I'll need time to find somewhere else. 4 months. She frowned. That's absurd. The spring buying season will be half over by then. We'll miss the best-selling window. Those are my terms, I said quietly. Otherwise, I'll contest everything and drag it out for years. Victoria studied me through narrowed eyes. In all our years together, I'd rarely given her ultimatums. She wasn't used to this version of me. Fine, she said finally. 4 months. But not a day more, and you pay the mortgage during that time. I agreed, hiding my relief. 4 months would give me the time I needed, with a small buffer for any unexpected delays. I'll call a mediator today, she said, already scrolling through her contacts. The sooner we start, the sooner I can move on with my life. Over the next few weeks, Victoria threw herself into divorce preparations with the same enthusiasm she'd once shown for planning our wedding. She hired not just a lawyer and a realtor, but a transition consultant who specialized in helping wealthy divorcees reset their lives. Meanwhile, I met quietly with Uncle Morris' executor, confirming the timeline and ensuring everything was in order. I also consulted my own lawyer, not about the divorce, but about what would happen if I sold the house and immediately rented it back from the new owners. The will is specific, my lawyer warned. You must own the house. A rental arrangement, even with a formal lease, wouldn't satisfy the condition, so that option was out. I needed to own the house until 3 weeks after probate. As our mediation sessions progressed, Victoria grew increasingly impatient with my insistence on keeping the house temporarily. I don't understand why you're so attached to this place, she said during our 3rd session. It's always been too small. The kitchen needs updating, and the master bathroom is practically prehistoric. It's not about attachment, I explained, which was true. It's about having time to make proper arrangements. The mediator, a practical woman in her 60s, who seemed unimpressed by Victoria's designer outfits, nodded. 4 months is not an unreasonable transition period. Victoria sighed dramatically. Meanwhile, someone else will buy the Prescott house. There will be other houses, I said. She shot me a look of pure disdain. Not like that one. You've never understood what quality really means, Thomas. You've always been satisfied with adequate. That night, as I sat alone in my living room, I thought about Victoria's words. Had I always settled for adequate? I'd built a successful accounting practice, specializing in helping small businesses grow. We lived comfortably, if not extravagantly. We'd taken nice vacations, though Victoria always compared our accommodations unfavorably to those of her friends. I tried to pinpoint when Victoria's dissatisfaction had begun to eclipse everything else. Maybe it was when her college roommate married a surgeon and built a mansion in the suburbs, or when her younger sister's husband made partner at a prestigious law firm. Or perhaps it had always been there, this hunger for status, and I'd simply been too in love to notice. Uncle Morris had seen it immediately. She collects designer labels, but doesn't read the books on your shelves, he'd observed after first meeting her. Watch yourself, nephew. I should have listened. 2 months into our separation, with the divorce proceedings moving smoothly toward completion, Victoria called to inform me she'd been invited to a charity gala at the Kennedy estate. Richard suggested I might want to view the property before the event, she said, her voice deliberately casual. He's considering selling next year. I see, I said, knowing exactly what she was implying. Richard Kennedy's estate was even more impressive than the Prescott house, situated on 15 acres with its own private beach access. He said it's a shame to have so much space for just one person, she continued. Very considerate of him, I replied neutrally. There was a pause. Then, have you started looking for a new place? The 4 months are half gone. I'm exploring options, I said vaguely. Thomas, her voice took on the sharp edge, I've grown so familiar with. You need to be realistic. You can't afford to stay in this neighborhood on your own. The sooner you accept that, the better. After we hung up, I walked through the house, seeing it through her eyes. The living room with its comfortable but unfashionable furniture. The kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals, while Victoria complained that none of our friends still prepared their own food. Study where I worked late into the night building a business she considered embarrassingly small scale. Had any of it ever been enough for her? The divorce was finalized exactly 9 weeks after Victoria first placed those papers on our kitchen table. True to her word, she'd made the process efficient. In the end, she got almost everything she wanted: the investment portfolio, the cabin, her share of my business. I kept my retirement accounts, my car, and temporarily, the house. "Congratulations," she said as we left the mediator's office for the last time. "You're free to find someone who appreciates your particular lifestyle choices." I smiled, thinking of Uncle Morris. "And you're free to pursue the life you've always wanted." She nodded, already distracted by something on her phone. Probably a text from Richard Kennedy. "Victoria," I said, causing her to look up. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She studied me for a moment, perhaps searching for sarcasm, but I meant it. Victoria had always been chasing something: status, validation, the admiration of people she considered important. I hoped for her sake that she'd someday find whatever would finally make her feel secure. "Goodbye, Thomas," she said, and walked away without looking back. 3 weeks later, Victoria called in a state of agitation. "The Prescott house was just sold," she said without preamble. "Some tech executive from California paid $300,000 over asking price, in cash." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely. Despite everything, I didn't wish her disappointment. "Richard says there's a property coming available in his neighborhood next month, but it needs extensive renovations." She paused. "If I had access to more capital." "Victoria," I said gently, "the settlement is final." She made a frustrated sound. "This is exactly why we couldn't stay together. Your complete lack of ambition or vision. Do you know what Richard did last year? He bought a struggling tech company for almost nothing, turned it around, and sold it for $20 million 6 months later." "That's impressive," I acknowledged. "He understands seizing opportunities," she continued. "He doesn't just exist." The contempt in her voice was palpable. After she hung up, I checked my calendar. Probate would be complete in exactly 1 week. 3 weeks after that, I would fulfill the terms of Uncle Morris' will and receive my inheritance. Victoria, meanwhile, would be leveraging her divorce settlement to impress Richard Kennedy, unaware that his company was showing serious signs of financial instability. As his former accountant, I still had colleagues who kept me informed. I wondered, briefly, if I should warn her. But Victoria had never wanted my advice about money or investments. She'd only wanted the results, the lifestyle, the status symbols, the ability to impress people she considered important. On the day the executor called to confirm that all conditions had been met, and the funds would be transferred to my accounts the following week, I was in the garden Uncle Morris had helped me plant years ago. Victoria had always hated it: too much maintenance, too messy, not impressive enough to justify the effort. I'd just finished pruning the roses when my phone rang again. "Thomas." Victoria's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "Why is Rebecca Winters telling people that you're selling the house next month?" Rebecca was my neighbor, a kind woman who'd been widowed young, and who often brought over extra portions of the casserole she made. "Because I am," I said simply. "But you haven't even listed it yet. And you said you couldn't afford to move." I smiled at a particularly beautiful bloom. "Things change." "What things?" she demanded. "What aren't you telling me?" I considered how to answer. The divorce was final. I had no legal obligation to share information about my financial situation with her anymore. "I've had some good news," I said finally. "What kind of good news?" Suspicion laced her tone. "The kind that's private." She was silent for a moment. Then, "You've been planning something all along. That's why you insisted on keeping the house." "I needed to stay here for a little while longer," I admitted. "Now I don't." "Why?" she pressed. I sighed. "We're not married anymore. I don't owe you explanations." "You tricked me," she accused. "Whatever this is, you deliberately kept it from me during the settlement." "The settlement is final," I reminded her, using her own words from weeks earlier. Another silence. Then, "Richard's company is in trouble," she said abruptly. "Some kind of accounting scandal. His assets might be frozen." So she'd finally discovered what I'd known for months. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "That's all you have to say," she snapped. "I might have made a huge mistake, and all you can offer is shallow sympathy." I thought about our 20 years together, about how she'd looked at Uncle Morris' modest clothing, and missed the wisdom in his eyes. about how she'd dismissed my career because it didn't impress her friends, never seeing the satisfaction it gave me to help small businesses succeed. What would you like me to say, Victoria? That I'm surprised you prioritized Richard's wealth and status over his character. I'm not. That I'll help you financially if things go badly. I won't. We've made our choices. This isn't who you are, she said, her voice smaller now. You've never been cruel. It's not cruelty to finally establish boundaries, I replied. It's something I should have done years ago. After we hung up, I sat in the garden Uncle Morris had loved and thought about the future. The inheritance would allow me to expand my practice, perhaps start the foundation for young entrepreneurs I'd always dreamed about. I could finally take that trip to New Zealand I'd been quietly planning for years, the one Victoria had dismissed as boring because it didn't include 5-star hotels and fashionable locations. Most importantly, I could live authentically, without constantly managing someone else's dissatisfaction. 3 days later, my realtor called with news that a family had made an offer on the house, a couple with 2 young children, who love the garden and the quiet street. They can't afford to go any higher, she warned, but they've written a lovely letter about how much they want to raise their kids here. I accepted their offer immediately, knowing Victoria would be appalled by my failure to negotiate. The following week, as promised, Uncle Morris executor transferred the inheritance, $37 million, to be used as I saw fit. The news would eventually get out. It was too substantial to keep completely quiet in a town our size. Victoria would learn of it, and she would finally understand. But by then, I would be gone, moved into a comfortable but not extravagant condo, while I planned my next steps. The family would be living in the house on Maple Street, adding their own memories to its walls, perhaps appreciating what Victoria never had, that a home's value isn't measured by its square footage or its address, but by the life lived within it. As I packed Uncle Morris' letters into a box for the move, I came across one of his favorite sayings, written in his shaky handwriting on a birthday card from years ago. Real wealth is having what money can't buy. I'd finally understood what he meant. Victoria never would. And that, more than any inheritance, was the true difference between us. Please like and subscribe for more great revenge story videos. We appreciate your support. We'd love to hear your family drama and revenge stories. Please feel free to share in the comments.